Hi, I'm Susan Rutledge, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to pick up color with the Eyedropper tool in Adobe Illustrator. Now, you may already use the Eyedropper tool to pick up fill color and stroke color, but the Eyedropper tool is capable of so many more things, like picking up appearances and special effects, and even grabbing color from photographs and your desktop and the internet. So these are the things I'm going to cover in the tutorial, and you're not going to want to miss a single minute. And we find the Eyedropper tool on the left toolbar, and it looks exactly like an eyedropper. And the keyboard shortcut for that is I. And if I double click on the icon, I'm going to open up the Eyedropper Options dialog box, which is where I can customize my Eyedropper tool. Here I can choose which attributes I want the eyedropper to pick up and which attributes I want it to apply to another object. Now, the default setting is to have everything checked, and that's typically how I'm going to leave my Eyedropper tool, but you might want to come in and play with some of these settings yourself. Now, notice at the bottom of the list we see character style and paragraph style, which means that the Eyedropper tool will also work on text. I'm not going to go over those applications in this video, but I did want to point out that's yet another way that you're able to use the Eyedropper tool. I'm going to go ahead and close out of the dialog box and get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and select this rectangle, which we're going to use to apply all the different attributes that we see on the artboard here with the Eyedropper tool. I'll get the Eyedropper tool, keyboard shortcut I, and we'll start out with the simple and the obvious. If I click on an object that has a fill color, then that fill color is applied to my selected object. If I click on an object that has a fill color and a stroke color, then the Eyedropper tool picks up both of those attributes and applies them to the selected object. What about if we have a double stroke? Well, let's come up here and click on this rectangle, and we see the Eyedropper tool has picked up all of those attributes. But what happens when we click on an object that has a special effect applied? Let's see what happens. On this particular rectangle, I actually have this orange color applied to it, but it has a 50% transparency. And if I click on this, will I get the transparency on the new rectangle? And the answer is yes. The Eyedropper tool picked up both the orange color and the transparency. Well, that was an easy one, but what about the 3D effects? Let's come over to the rectangle that has this 3D effect and click on it. And once again, we see that the Eyedropper tool is able to pick up this special effect. Let's come over to this yellow rectangle that has a drop shadow effect and click here, and we see that we have the yellow color applied and this drop shadow. Now, my next rectangle has a special effect applied. It is not a rounded rectangle. If it was a rounded rectangle, the Eyedropper tool would not be able to pick that up, but I found that effect by coming up to Effect, down to Stylize, and here at the bottom we see round corners, and that's where I changed my rectangle. So when I click on this blue rectangle, the Eyedropper tool does pick up the round corners and applies it along with the blue fill color to our rectangle. Now we're going to come to a rectangle that has a pattern swatch applied. I'm going to click on the pattern swatch, and the Eyedropper tool not only changed the corners back to square corners to match the attributes of the rectangle I clicked on, but it did in fact add the pattern swatch as well. Now, the next rectangle has a gradient applied. When I click here, the gradient is applied to the selected rectangle, and it's kept all of the settings of the gradient. And then finally, I have another special effect. This is the scribble effect. And when I click on this, the Eyedropper tool picks up the blue color and the scribble effect. So these are just a few of the ways we can click on an object with the Eyedropper tool and have the different attributes applied to another rectangle. But what happens when we use the Eyedropper tool and click on a line segment and apply that to a rectangle? Well, I'm going to come over to this navy 7-point stroke and show you. As I click on this, because there's not a fill color associated with the stroke, the eyedropper tool removes the fill color from the rectangle, but it does apply this 7-point stroke around the outer edge. I'll get similar results if I click on this green dotted line. The eyedropper tool picks up the green color and it picks up this dotted line setting, but it leaves the fill color empty again. Now I'm going to get the pencil tool, keyboard shortcut in, and draw out a simple little curved line and get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and select my line, and get the eyedropper tool again, keyboard shortcut I, and this time I want to show you what happens if I click on this purple line segment that has a round cap applied, and the eyedropper tool is going to pick up all of those attributes, as it will if I click on this line segment that has an arrowhead applied to it, or the blue line that has a width profile added to it. So these are just a few of the ways that you can use the eyedropper tool to pick up attributes on a line segment and apply those to any object on your artboard. But we can do even more if we use a keyboard shortcut. I'm going to delete this line and get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and select our rectangle again and get the eyedropper tool, keyboard shortcut I. Now what I want to do is keep the green dotted line but use the eyedropper tool to pick up the orange fill color from this rectangle so that I can have both at the same time. Now what we've learned so far is that if I click on this orange object, I'm going to lose that green dotted line, just like if I click on the green dotted line, I'm going to lose the orange fill, unless I hold down the Shift key. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and I'm going to come back up to this orange object and click, and look what happened. I was able to add the orange fill and still keep my green dotted line. Now let me explain how this process works. First of all, the Shift key is allowing me to isolate the color, and what it's going to do is target the fill color if the fill color icon is on top here on the left toolbar, or it's going to target the stroke color if the stroke is on top. Now to get the stroke on top, I can either click on it or I can use the keyboard shortcut X, and X toggles between the stroke color and the fill color. So what I'm going to do now is press the keyboard shortcut X. That's going to put the stroke color on top, and then we're going to change the color of the line to blue. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key. This time I'm targeting my stroke and click on this blue rectangle, and all the eyedropper tool does when we isolate the color is it changes the color, so I still even have the dotted line. And as long as the stroke icon is on top and I hold down the Shift key, I can change the color of my dotted line to any color that I want. Now I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut X, and that's going to move the fill color icon back on top. And this time I'm going to hold down the Shift key and come over to this pattern swatch. Now when I press down on one of these colors, Illustrator isn't going to pick up the entire pattern swatch. It's going to pick up whatever color that I click on. So you can see that there are some lighter browns, there's some darker browns, and whatever I press here, as long as I hold the Shift key down, the eyedropper tool is going to apply that fill color to my rectangle. And then if I come over to the rectangle that has the gradient in it and I hold that Shift key down, wherever I click is the color that the eyedropper tool is going to apply to the rectangle. Now if I come up to the rectangle that has a transparency, remember the eyedropper tool is only picking up color when I hold the Shift key down and not special effects. So when I click here, the eyedropper tool picks up the color, but it's going to be at 100% opacity. So the key is, if you want to change the fill color, you've got to have the fill color icon on top, and if you want to change the stroke color, that stroke color has got to be on top. And we toggle those back and forth using the keyboard shortcut X, and then we hold down the Shift key as we choose one of those colors. And for one last example, I'm going to hold the Shift key down and I'm going to click on this pink stroke to show you that you can even pull a color from the stroke and apply it to a fill color. Well, we've already seen how useful the eyedropper tool can be, but I want to show you one of my favorite things that it does, and that's picking up color out of a photograph. This is a picture I pulled in from my photo library, and it has a number of really nice colors in it. I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and select the red rectangle, then get the eyedropper tool, keyboard shortcut I. And then I want to capture this raspberry color out of this flower, so I'll click here, and not only does Illustrator not give me the raspberry color, but it removed the previous fill that I had in that rectangle. Well, the reason is the eyedropper tool doesn't quite know what to do with pixels, and to help it along, I've got to hold down the Shift key, and when I do, and then I press down on the raspberry color, the eyedropper tool picks up the color and places it in the rectangle just like I wanted it to. Now I'm going to come down and select this yellow rectangle. To get the selection tool quickly, I'm going to hold down the Command key on a Mac, the Control key on a PC, and that temporarily converts the eyedropper tool to a selection tool, so I can click on the rectangle and select it, then release the key, and I'm back to my eyedropper tool. And this time, instead of taking the eyedropper tool over and just clicking straight on a color, I'm going to hold the Shift key down and drag the eyedropper tool onto the picture, and notice on the left toolbar the color fill icon changes as I scroll over the various colors. And when I find a color that I want, I'm going to then release my mouse, and the eyedropper tool applies the color to my rectangle. Now I'm going to hold the Command key down on a Mac, the Control key on a PC, and that gives me a temporary selection tool, which I'm able to select this green rectangle with. Then I'll release the key, and I'm going to hold the Shift key down again, and we're going to go shopping for a green color this time. And I can look on the left toolbar to see what the color is, and when I find one that I like, I'll release my mouse, and the green is applied to my rectangle. I think this is a great way to add new colors to our projects, and I find myself taking a lot more pictures when I come across colors that I think I might like to use for a future project. But we're not limited to pulling color just off of our artboard. We can pull it from anywhere off of our screen now. What I'm going to do is take my eyedropper tool, and I've got it right at the top edge of my artboard, and I'll press down with my mouse, and you see a little square next to the eyedropper tool, which tells us that it's ready to pick up color from anywhere on our screen. So I'll keep my mouse pressed down, and I'm going to drag the eyedropper out onto the Illustrator interface. And as I do, notice the color fill icon on the left toolbar is now the gray of Illustrator. Now I'm going to move up to the higher bar, which is a little lighter gray, and the color is going to change. And then we're going to drag all the way over to this little blue share button, and I'm going to release my mouse here, and the eyedropper tool applies that blue to my rectangle. Now Illustrator is taking up my whole screen right now, so I'm going to have to move it over to the right so that you can see a little bit of my desktop. Then I'll come back and place the eyedropper tool right on the edge of the artboard. I'll press down with my mouse, and I'm going to drag all the way out to the desktop, and you can look at that color fill icon and see that the eyedropper is picking up that background color. If I come down here to this picture, I can pick up the color of the picture without even holding down the Shift key. And in addition to picking up color from the desktop, the eyedropper tool can pick up color directly from a browser. So I'm going to come over here. I've got my website open, and these are some of the books that I've published, and I'll look for a color that I want to pick up. And when I find one that I like, I'm going to release my mouse, and here's a color that I've pulled directly from the cover of one of my books. Well, we've covered a lot of different ways that you're able to use the eyedropper tool to either work with color or bring new color into your projects, and I hope you've enjoyed learning all about this great little tool. I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel now so that you don't miss any of my future tutorials, and I'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye now.